Hey everyone, and welcome back to our Primer podcast. This is our final week of our Winning the War in Your Mind series. And Nathan, we've just been so grateful for you joining us for this podcast. And we hope this isn't your last podcast with us, but obviously wrapping up this kind of intensive together. So thank you for being here. I know that it's been a benefit to me, but also to so many of our folks as well. I know my small group personally has really enjoyed digging into the stuff that you've shared and the way that you've given us new perspective in engaging with these negative thought patterns. Today we're going to talk a little bit about when our negative thought patterns go haywire a bit, right? We've been talking about this idea that, hey, we've got kind of these negative thoughts that we carry with us, and there are these myths that we believe about ourselves. But those negative thoughts can oftentimes then cultivate these spaces of panic where we become so fixated on anything that seems to affirm the negative thought.
That's right.
And I was talking on Sunday, but I think about the spaces where we are so prone to think about what went wrong versus all the things that went right, right? Like I can preach a sermon and others, really appreciate it and got a lot out of it, but I know I flubbed up that one point, or hey, I missed that point. I came circling back around to it.
You said a word wrong.
Yeah, and I said a word wrong, and and that's all I'm thinking about, right? Because that's an affirmation that I'm not good at this, and
the narrative is true.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And, I remember that high school band, right? Yeah. You get done with the concert and your mom and dad, you did so good. And all you can think about is, well, I was flat on that one note and that probably ruined everything. And you're just my parents, and so you're making me feel better. And, but we're so hyper fixated on the things that we've done wrong, I think, because it affirms those negative thoughts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to go looking for evidence that whatever story we're telling ourselves is true. Yeah. And Groeschel gets into the amygdala and why that our amygdala kind of goes into action whenever these obsessive and spinning thoughts are present.
Right.
In an attempt to protect us in some way.
Yeah, he says there's a little almond-shaped part of our brains called the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for emotions and survival instincts. When you're afraid, the amygdala lights up like a pinball machine, producing fight or flight response. Yeah. The amygdala deploys a tsunami of adrenaline, preparing the body for action. That's a good thing if you're hiking on a trail and come across a poisonous snake poised to strike. You need to get out of its way quickly. The amygdala did its job. The problem is the amygdala is not objective. Yeah. The way it responds to a snake is the same way it responds to a hurtful conversation.
Yeah, if those who are my clients who are listening, they hear me talk about the bear in the woods a lot. And similar analogy to what Groeschel's using, that if you are walking through the woods and encounter a bear, we really need that part of our brain to show up and protect us.
Yeah.
But when we're moving through the world, just trying to do daily tasks or play the different roles in our lives, we really need for it to kind of be a little quieter.
Yeah.
And so often, whenever those thoughts come into our brain, we begin reacting to them. And that's what we've talked about through this whole series, is kind of creating that pause where we begin to investigate and think about our thoughts differently. So we're not just reacting to that immediate intrusive thought.
Right.
It allows us to take a minute and go, is this thought congruent with the narrative that I want to be living, that I know is true in me? If you got done with the sermon and said, I messed that up, I must be a terrible pastor.
Yeah.
That creating that pause to go, no, I'm just a human.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me a terrible preacher. I just flubbed up a word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But how do you do, that's one of those challenges is it's like, okay, sure, sitting here in a podcast where we're not in fight or flight mode, it's easy to say okay, the bear's not a bear, it's a flubbed up word, so you need to not panic there. in that moment, it very much feels that way.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so how do you break through that experience of panic? And like you're at this point where your negative thoughts have created this environment where then these mistakes or these points of pain, produce this fear response in us. What do we do when we get to that point?
Yeah. Well, I think there's always an undercurrent that is flowing beneath
Hmm.
anything that's happening in our world. That even if we feel like we are in utter chaos,
Yeah.
there's kind of this other undercurrent of peace and joy that I think we can access.
Hmm.
And when I think about that undercurrent, there's different paths down to it.
Yeah.
And we can kind of jump into a few of those if that's helpful.
Right.
But this undercurrent of joy that we can kind of tap into that is constantly flowing beneath the surface.
Okay, so there's this idea where we're stuck on this surface place, and we're fighting against what's going on at the surface,
Yeah.
but really down below is where we're trying to get to. Groeschel talks about in his book seeing through the circumstances to that joy, and I love he uses that magic eye kind of example. Have you ever done one of those? You hold it to your eyes, you go cross-eyed, and you kind of see it, and suddenly the dolphins pop off the page, and there's this reality that's remarkably challenging to do that. But when it happens, it's like, oh, suddenly I'm seeing something that wasn't there before. I think Paul has been kind of an example for us over the course of this series as someone whose circumstances don't fit their joy. And I wonder if this passage here in Acts 16 maybe gives us a clue of how we access that undercurrent of joy. So Paul and Silas at this point have just cast a spirit out of a girl who was a prophet, and so she was a slave girl that was being used by her owners to turn a prophet as a prophet, and so they cast this spirit out of her that obviously makes her owners furious because now they've lost their stream of income, and they rile this crowd against them. And so it says the crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and their magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. After they were severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Right? So Paul and Silas, circumstances, not ideal.
Yeah.
Right? Fight or flight.
Oh.
Amygdala triggered in that moment.
As it should be.
And yet, what are they doing? They're singing.
Singing. Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for us? Like, what's happening there?
Yeah.
From a mental health perspective.
First of all, I think you throw me in that situation, and I don't know if I truly don't know that I could find the peace and joy stream.
Yeah.
It may take me.
I'm gonna be listening for you to be singing through the wall.
Yeah, it may take me quite a while to get there, but so I mean, it's fascinating story. But yeah, so I think about what are the different paths down to that undercurrent.
Yeah.
Of joy that's always there for us to go dip our toes into.
Yeah.
One of those paths, I think, is gratitude.
Okay.
Right? That the practice of gratitude, time and time again, shows up as being one of the pathways to experiencing joy and peace.
Yeah.
And I often couple those two things together. Sometimes when we think of the word joy, we think of this sort of elated happiness, we're
jubilance.
We're jubilant, singing,
Yeah.
dancing, but joy, I think, is so tied to this idea of peace that we can find the steadiness amidst the rockiness of what life throws our way. And so one of those being gratitude, looking around in our life and finding those anchor points, those things that we are so grateful for, that we are given, the points of stability that continue to show up, whether it be a person or a job that has been steady, a place to live, food on our tables, kids that are healthy, whatever it is in our life that we just feel that immense gratitude for. And when we're moving along the journey of life, it's so easy to forget
Yeah.
how much that we have, and how grateful that we can
Yeah.
be for it. So that's one of
So
them.
with gratitude, is that something that's just like in my head? Is there a practice tied to that? What are you?
Yeah. So I often recommend keeping a gratitude journal, and that could be in the
Yeah.
notes app of your phone if
Right.
you wanted to. But looking for 2 or 3 things each day that you're grateful for that happened. Maybe
Yeah.
it was something with a coworker in passing, a passing conversation or a compliment they gave you, something that you can kind of lean on to. Oftentimes, when we think about this, I'm thankful for my family, I'm thankful for my health, but there are little things that happen in our day
Yeah.
that if we turn our attention to it, we notice, man, I'm really thankful that happened. I'm thankful I got the text message
Yeah.
from a friend I haven't heard from.
Well,
in
and
a
it's
long
almost
time.
the more specific you can be,
Yes.
the easier it is to then
Correct.
recognize that
Yes.
in your life.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm thankful for my family. That's going to be the case every day.
Every day, yeah.
Right.
Those are more macro,
Yeah.
which is great to be.
I'm thankful for the air in my life.
Right,
But
right.
but instead, like, I'm thankful for that moment where I was sitting on my front steps and there was a
Yeah.
bird at the bird feeder that was like, hey man, that
Absolutely.
was something that brought me joy today.
Yeah.
That if I don't mark it, maybe it never
Exactly.
actually roots me in that joy. So that's interesting. So what Paul and Silas are doing here is they're accessing
Yes.
intentionally this
Yes.
undercurrent of joy. How? Through their singing, right?
Yeah.
So for them, that they're in jail, they can't write their gratitude journal. Maybe they can carve
No,
on the floor.
They can't get their phone out.
Yeah, but for them,
Yeah.
they can access that undercurrent of joy and peace
Yeah.
through singing. For us, it might be in gratitude and journaling, and that's been a practice that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Another one that I find is like in the midst of kind of that panic response, getting outside and walking and getting out and taking a hike or getting into nature is like this immediate space where, hey, yes, things are crazy, but here everything has stayed the same, right? And I'm experiencing this natural beauty of God.
Absolutely.
That's changing things.
Yeah, it's these reminders that our individual world feels chaotic.
Right.
But there are points of stability all around us. There's big giant oak trees that have been there for 100 years.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what's going on around them. They're still standing. They're still up. These are points of connection with things that are anchoring. Another one of those kind of paths down to the undercurrent of joy, I think, is social connection.
Yeah.
Which is a great plug for small group.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
That social connection, not a place where we're comparing ourselves to other people, but a place where we're experiencing genuine human connection.
Right.
Harvard has the longest running study on human happiness. Over 90 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's over 90 years at this point.
Okay, we got it on the podcast.
You got it on the everybody can Google
it's just
it.
there.
Yeah. But one of the thing that they really boiled it down to was that the quality of your relationships determine the quality of the happiness of your life. And it's so important to remember that people are often our lifelines in the midst of struggle and pain, that we meet one another in those spaces, that's what we are here for when we talk about loving one another, that we are here to identify with each other's pain and also go, look, I know you, I've been where you are. Just keep your head down and keep trudging through. You're going to get through this. Thank you for sharing it with me. Social connection.
And it's interesting too, because not just any social connection, right? Because social connection can in many ways be the very thing that produces this. I was talking to a couple that I'm doing premarital counseling with this week. And one of the things they asked were like, hey, in that first year of marriage, when things are hard, what do you recommend? And I was like, I would recommend now, before those things are hard, developing a relationship with a couple that's 20, 30 years your senior, so that you can meet regularly with them. And then when the things that feel so big and so significant in those moments hit, you've got this grounding relationship that can speak into that and say, hey, I remember that, we had a similar thing happen. And that becomes this social anchor that draws us out. Or it's looking like hey, I've got this small group community that's wonderful and it's great, but there can be some social challenges in that too. And so, hey, there's this one individual person that is kind of this rock for me.
Yeah.
And so when these things are chaotic, I'm going to connect with that person
Yes.
and sit by the fire and talk, and maybe it's talking about, meaningful things, and maybe it's just being present together that helps walk through that. What would be other things that you think of as pathways to that undercurrent?
Yeah. Well, just to kind of finish up on the social connection piece, so many of researchers that look into addiction find that social connection is one of the main tenets in recovery.
Yeah.
This is why we have groups like AA or Celebrate Recovery. And again, to your
Sponsors
point, it sponsors. It's not just social connection. It's the quality of it.
Yeah.
It's how vulnerable can I be with these folks? And there are several of these professionals that would say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but connection. And of course, I think it's much larger than that, right? It's not just a simple answer, but it's to the point that social connection allows us to connect with joy.
And I think with all of these, really, what we're getting at too is there's an intentionality to it, right?
Yeah.
There's this characteristic that says, like, okay, you're not just going to say I'm thankful for whatever it is, right? I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to think about, hey, this is the pain I'm in, and so I'm going to see through that and find these moments that I missed.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not just, hey, I just happened to be walking outside. It's man, it just feels chaotic, and I need to get space and air. And it's not just, hey, I happen to be at a restaurant with 100 people in it. And we're just all getting food.
Right.
I'm specifically pursuing this intentional relationship.
And another thing that I think we can be intentional about, another one of these paths, and I would sort of couple all these in one, which would be prayer, meditation, and presence.
Yeah.
That in the midst of chaos, when our headspace just feels absolutely jumbled, being present, being prayerful, being meditative.
Yeah.
Are practices that allow us to connect with joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, prayer can be so powerful, but it's also, it's so dynamic too. And that's one of the things I've found as a pastor is that the concept of just praying is a hard concept for folks. Cause it's like, we basically get in this place where it's like, okay, I have to have this monologue to God, right? I need to just say all the things, and I don't know the things to say, and but prayer is so diverse. And one of the apps that I think can be really helpful to help in these spaces, because a lot of times when I'm in those chaotic thoughts, all I can get out is like, God help me, and then it's like, that's all I got, right?
That's all I got.
And I find this, there's an app called Lectio 365, Lectio, for those that are looking for it, and then just the numbers 365. And they have 2 guided prayers a day.
Yeah. Right.
And a lot of times when I'm feeling stressed, and even when it's just normal stress, right? Sunday mornings, I do a Lectio 365, right? Where it's not these negative thought patterns and these it's like, hey, this is a stressful experience, right? That you getting up on stage and it's hard to collect your thoughts, and you sit in that space, and it's like, okay, now I'm meditating on the prayers of others, and that draws me in. Now I'm meditating on scripture. Now I'm meditating on a question. And I think, when we talk about prayer, it's not just, hey, polish up a monologue and say the same thing, every day at dinner and
here's all the things I want
to
ask God to do.
Right. It's opening up this pathway that cuts into the joy. And I think that's, one of the beauties of this faith journey is that, in the midst of kind of a secular world, a lot of these principles are remain the same, right? Is trying to find stability in the midst of chaos. The beauty that we have is we always know where stability lies, right? Stability always lies in the presence of our God. Joy always comes from God. We can't produce joy of our own volition. Instead, it always comes from God. And so we have these pathways to draw us back in, and just participate in the character of God.
I think presence brings us in, and again, presence, meditation, prayer being kind of in the same.
Mm-hmm.
But presence brings us back to that truth
Yeah.
that when things are spinning and chaotic, typically our fear is about something that will happen or might happen, or something that we are perceiving will happen to
Yeah.
us. Presence brings us into the space where we're safe,
Yeah.
which is in the present. While you and I are recording this podcast, there's nothing happening to us right now.
Right.
We both have things in our world and in our personal lives that are chaotic,
Mm-hmm.
and in our work lives that are chaotic. But right now in this space,
Yeah.
there's nothing happening to
You
us.
just triggered my amygdala a little bit.
Yeah, he started thinking about it all, right? Yeah. But presence reminds us of that ever-present stability that is always there in the
Right.
moment.
Right.
And being mindful of that can be so helpful in experiencing the joy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I think it is, just this encouragement to say, hey, how do we find that presence to remain in this moment, to not allow the worries of yesterday or the fears of tomorrow to grip us? And I think, an important thing for folks to hear is that it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Right? These are 4 ways. There are hundreds of ways to do this. I think of, folks that have an artistic bend and experiencing the creativity of God, and engaging with folks that are writers and journaling, and there's so many different ways to experience, that undercurrent of joy. And so it's thinking through, what is it, and maybe just picking one that feels like it resonates with you, and just testing that.
Yeah.
The next few times that I feel that kind of triggering fear, I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to be like Paul and Silas, who chaos around them, praising. I'm gonna test one of those things out, and then over time, see how that impacts your ability to, yes, recognize those fears, recognize that trigger, but then come back and root yourself back into it. So yeah, well,
Awesome.
Folks, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I hope that this is really fruitful in your discussion. And if you've taken anything from this series, the hope is that you're not alone. We're walking in this together, and there's hope on the other side of those negative thoughts that the world so often projects upon us. We'll see you soon.